Thank you so much, Program Director, and colleagues and friends on this group. Today's topic is Gandhiji as a global leader, and Pascal Nazareth has researched and written extensively on Gandhiji's outstanding leadership. He explores personal leadership traits, achievements, impact of his ideas on others globally, vindication of Gandhiji's vision, and finally, Gandhiji as ideal leadership model. We see that there are many definitions of leadership. Some describe it from the point of view of personal traits, others from a set of activities that a leader and his or her followers engage in. Others yet describe it objectively as a complex moral relationship between people based in trust, obligation, commitment, and a shared vision of the good. Yet others describe leadership as people who shape the future, get things done, manage others, invest in others, and demonstrate personality proficiency. Others yet speak of connecting people and resources across the world, crossing boundaries of culture, language, etc. There are many more attributes that people speak about, but I have looked at just one set of attributes in this presentation, and that is how Gandhiji evolved and developed ideas which were then nurtured through further learning and from experience as well as experimentation as the basis of my discussion here. For me, personality attribution, where the person is seen as a unique being with qualities that are inherent and considered divine and supernatural, is elevating a person in a way that says that he was great and could do a number of things, but we can't. What he did is beyond the reach of ordinary people. For me, Gandhiji was very much a human being. And yes, I believe that other people can try to learn from him and attain what he was able to do. So here I am going to focus on three aspects. Firstly, the most important thoughts and ideas that Gandhiji projected according to my view. Secondly, how these ideas are important for the present and future generations. And thirdly, the global importance of these ideas. I will focus on the years he spent in South Africa as the focal point of my discussion. He arrived in South Africa in 1893 at the age of 24, father of two sons, Harilal and Manilal, and having traveled to and trained as a lawyer in the UK. A young lawyer with Western elitist notion of class and status. We see this in his emphasis on his dress code and on where he should live and how he should travel. He had led a fairly sheltered life for the 24 years within his family, who were certainly not poor, and because of their status had no real occasion to be insulted or rudely treated, even in colonized India. But in Durban, within a short while of his arrival, he saw that people of color were rudely treated, and he himself was subjected to several rude and sometimes violent incidents. We all know of the rude treatment in the Durban court, the Pietermaritzburg railway incident, followed by others on that journey. All this violent and rude treatment did have an impact on Gandhiji. It awakened in him a sense of wanting to resist the injustice. However, he felt that anything that affects only him as an individual should be separated from that which affects a large number of people, and that it was then a duty to take action. This, one could say, was the beginning of the idea of resistance to evil wherever one sees it. That became entrenched in his worldview, and he began to look at how to resist, which then gave rise to the notion of nonviolent resistance, which he described as satyagraha. There is a history behind the terminology, which I think you are all familiar with, so I won't talk about it. But following this incident, he began to raise awareness in the community of the many unjust policies and laws, and to mobilize protests against some of these laws in South Africa. He started the Natal Indian Congress in 1894, a year after he had arrived, on the 22nd of August, just a year after he had arrived in South Africa. As tradition would have it, the NIC was all male, and the resistance engaged all male participants. But 10 years later, in 1904, on a train journey, a friend, Henry Pollack, gave him a little book by Ruskin, which he read on the train and which inspired him so much that he wrote, and I quote, "The teaching of unto this last I understand to be, one, that the good of the individual is contained in the good of all. Two, that a lawyer's work has the same value as the barber's, in as much as all have the same right of earning their livelihood from their work. And three, that a life of labor, that is the life of the tiller of the soil and the handicraftsman, is the life worth living." The first of these I knew. The second I had dimly realized. The third had never occurred to me. Unto this last made it as clear as daylight for me that the second and the third were contained in the first. I arose with the dawn, ready to reduce these principles into practice. So the first thing we learn about Gandhiji is that whatever he thought of, he made sure he practiced it. Thus was born Gandhiji's first settlement or ashram, which is the Phoenix settlement in Inanda, in Durban, close to Durban. Here he began his experiments with a way of life that moved him and his family from the city to a humble rural abode where his experiments began. So the first point in these experiments that I want to raise is that he began holistic thought, which entailed looking at the interconnectivity and interdependence among the various disciplines. Example, natural sciences, health science, law and arts and culture, among various races, various classes, various religions, and gender. He broke down barriers and concentrated on the commonalities. He took the central features and helped to develop them so that the importance of the discipline, background, roots, beliefs, gender, etc., remains, but the hierarchical nature was broken down and the barriers were removed. so that there was free flow of ideas, free communication, and better understanding. So this holistic view was the first, philosophical idea that I would like to put forward in this presentation. The second one is the interfaith work that he did. On the issue of religion, one of the residents of Phoenix wrote, this was Mr. West, who was living there, and he wrote, and I quote, "At the daily prayers and the Sunday services at Phoenix, there was a joining together of men, women, and children in a united spiritual exercise. Hindus, Muslims, Parsis, and Christians sang hymns and read the various scriptures in different languages. This, to my mind, was a unique example of a universal church service where no particular religion was placed in a superior position and where truth and love were acknowledged to be the universal attributes of God. Gandhiji was a great lover of these meetings and indeed was the prime mover in all such gatherings." A close quote. So this was his interfaith belief. And I think that that is the second very important viewpoint in his philosophy. The third one was about his holistic approach to health. He looked at the issue of mind, body, and soul. And he wrote extensively on his various experiments with, for instance, mud poultices, with hydrotherapy, with diets, with various exercises, in particular walking. Nature cure became an important part of his life. And so that was the third one, that holistic view to health. And the fourth point I want to make is the nonviolence. He wrote about his experiences and his participation in the South African wars against the Afrikaans community and the Zulu community, in which he had organized a group of volunteers who provided some first aid and care and attention to those wounded in these wars. He wrote many articles on his experiences relating the horror of war and violence and the suffering of the victims. His focus was always on the suffering of the victims. But as he witnessed these atrocities, he became more and more convinced that nonviolence is the way to go. And that's when he developed the whole notion of nonviolence. The fifth issue is environmental awareness or environmental issues. His life on the settlement taught him the importance of conserving the resources of the earth, the use of waste to create fertile soil, the protection of springs and all water sources, harvesting of rainwater, growing food, taking care of the scarce resources that they had. The whole idea of recycle, reuse, restore were put into practice at Phoenix and the Tolstoy farm, even though they didn't use that terminology. But that is what they did, and that was in 1904. So you can imagine today how relevant it is. And he wrote, and I quote, "In spite of the large number of settlers, one could not find refuse or dirt anywhere on the farm. All the rubbish was buried in trenches sunk for the purpose. No water was permitted to be thrown on the roads. All wastewater was collected in buckets and used to water the trees. Leavings of food and vegetable refuse were utilized as manure. A square pit 1.5 feet deep was sunk near the house to receive the night soil, which was fully covered with excavated earth and which therefore did not give out any smell. There were no flies, and no one would imagine that night soil had been buried there. If night soil was properly utilized, we would get manure worth lakhs of rupees and also secure immunity from a number of diseases. This is what he wrote in Satyagraha in South Africa in relation to the Tolstoy farm. The sixth point that I want to make is about media. He began to see the vital importance of the media as he helped to produce the Indian opinion and began to see how important media was to raise awareness on important issues, to educate the community generally, and to mobilize communities. For many years, even after his departure, the Indian opinion started in 1903 by him, continued. The press was relocated from Durban to Phoenix in 1904, and the Indian opinion was printed from the Phoenix settlement until 1962, when the stringent laws controlling freedom of thought made it impossible to continue with the press. These and many other lessons were learned through the ashram experience at Phoenix settlement. Example is self-sufficiency through meeting own needs through own labor, importance of financial integrity through meticulously keeping all accounts and building interpersonal relationships. These and other ideas were reduced to writing in Hind Swaraj, which Gandhiji wrote 5 years later in 1909 and was published in the Indian Opinion. In all this work, Gandhiji's ability to attract people to follow him could be witnessed when so many families gave up their townhouses and moved to Phoenix. Workers braved the wrath of their employers by going on strike, and the many people, including women and children, who defied the border laws by crossing the borders between the then independent republics of Natal and the Transvaal and courting imprisonment. Kasturba Gandhi was imprisoned in Pietermaritzburg when they went embarked on Satyagraha campaign in 1913. People made the sacrifices because they saw and understood the oppression they were made to suffer. And this was a way to protest against that oppression. When Gandhiji was departing from South Africa, he said that Satyagraha was now entrenched in the community. He had given them a way to oppose the atrocities that they suffered. His presence was no longer needed in South Africa, and therefore he intended to take Satyagraha back to India and to oppose the British colonialism. Now, how do these lessons he learned and taught, what are their importance for today's world? Our present times are plagued with intense poverty, inequality, and the resultant breakdown of common human values, of honesty, of compassion, of respect, love, and responsibility, resulting in a lot of misery around the world. The important values that Gandhiji spoke about in Hind Swaraj are so relevant to combat these issues that plague us today. Nasrat in his book shows very explicitly how Gandhiji's ideas of non-violence, of self-sufficiency, of interfaith respect and harmony, of removing class and caste barriers, and building an egalitarian society based on values of respect, compassion, empathy, and love are still relevant today, and in fact are ideas that can help us save the fragile planet from being destroyed by the forces of greed, violence, power, and anger. These ideas of participatory, bottom-up governance based on Gram Swaraj can lead to much more harmony and satisfaction than the top-down approach, where we build elitism and spend much needed money on election campaigns than on providing adequate and well-contemplated services. The rat race to accumulation of wealth is debilitating all the organs of society, with the huge rift between the super wealthy and the starving masses. Such a situation is totally against the first principle he learned from Ruskin, namely, the good of the individual is contained in the good of all. We see this principle so starkly revealed during the COVID pandemic. The coronavirus did not discriminate between the poor and the wealthy. Everyone was equally vulnerable, but we were all dependent on the silent workers who kept our neighborhoods clean, who nursed us through our illnesses, and performed the many essential tasks so that we could continue to live in dignity. So, learning from the pandemic and from the possibility of more such pandemics happening in the future, we have begun to realize, or many of us have begun to realize, the fragility of our lives, the lives of those around us, and of our planet as a whole. Yet, there are those who will persist in violence, in wars, and in polluting our environment. It is now a challenge that our future generation faces on how they can oppose these continued irresponsible behavior. Gandhiji's lessons are the most crucial at this time, as they are the most appropriate instruments to save us from disaster. Greta Thunberg and her followers have, for instance, pointed out that the youth can be mobilized and that the powers that be need to heed the warning. We can only help them to follow the path of righteousness and nonviolence, as Gandhiji had shown us. So, in my view, these are the global leadership qualities of Gandhiji, and absolutely relevant for today, for our young people, and for all of us. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Mrs. Ila Gandhi and Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishna, as well as the organizers, Professor Darepa Konur, Professor Satish, and Najoda, Dr. Uday P. Krishna, and not to forget the guest of honor, Sri P.C. Narayana. I want to speak about Lead to Kindly Light, the meaning and significance of this song for Mahatma Gandhi, and why we can think about Gandhi as a global guide. So first about the background, and then the statements of Gandhi about this song. So Lead Kindly Light Amid the Encircling Gloom is a hymn with words written in 1833 by St. John Henry Newman as a poem titled The Pillar of the Cloud, which was first published in the British magazine in 1834. John Henry Newman, 1801 to 1890, was an English theologian and poet, first an Anglican priest and later a Catholic priest and cardinal, who was canonized as saint in the Catholic Church in 2019. As a young priest, John Henry Newman became sick while in Italy and was unable to travel for almost 3 weeks. In his own words, "Before starting from my inn, I sat down on my bed and began to sob bitterly. My servant, who had acted as my nurse, asked what ailed me. I could only answer, 'I have a work to do in England.' I was aching to get home, yet for want of a vessel, I was kept at Palermo for 3 weeks. I began to visit the churches, and they calmed my impatience, though I did not attend any service. At last, I got off in an orange boat bound for Marseille. We were becalmed for a whole week in the Straits of Bonifacio, and it was there that I wrote the lines, 'Lead Kindly Light,' which have since become so well known." The largest mining disaster in the Durham coalfield in England was at West Stanley Colliery, known locally as the Burns Pit, when 168 men and boys lost their lives as the result of 2 underground explosions at 3:45 p.m. on Tuesday, 16 February 1909. In the Townley seam, 63 lay dead. In the Tilly seam, 18 lay dead. In the Busty seam, 33 lay dead. And in the Brockwell seam, 48 lay dead. But incredibly, there were still men alive underground. A group of 34 men and boys in the Tilly seam had found a pocket of clean air. They were led by Deputy Mark Henderson. A few of them panicked and left the group. They died instantly after inhaling the poison gas. The remainder sat in almost total darkness when one of them began humming the hymn, "Lead Kindly Light." In no time at all, the rest of the miners joined in with the words, "Lead kindly light, amidst the encircling gloom, lead thou me on. The night is dark and I am far from home." This was probably sung to the tune Sandon by C.H. Purday, popular with miners in the Durham coalfield. Before the hymn ended, young Jimmy Gardner died of injuries. These 26 men were rescued after 14 hours. 4 others were later rescued. This hymn, "Lead Kindly Light," became a favorite of Mahatma Gandhi. "Lead kindly light amidst the encircling gloom, lead thou me on. The night is dark and I am far from home, lead thou me on. Keep thou my feet. I do not ask to see the distant scene. One step enough for me. I was not ever thus, nor prayed that thou shouldst lead me on. I love to choose and see my path, but now lead thou me on. I love the garish day, and spite of fears, pride ruled my will. Remember not past years. So long thy power hath blessed me, sure it still will lead me on, o'er moor and fen, o'er crag and torrent, till the night is gone. And with the morn, those angel faces smile, which I have loved long since and lost a while. In young India on 29th of December 1920, Gandhi wrote, "One step enough for me" on a certain Mr. Stokes. Quote, Mr. Stokes is a Christian who wants to follow the light that God gives him. He has adopted India as his home. He is watching the non-cooperation movement from the Kotagiri hills, where he is living in isolation from the India of the plains and serving the hillmen. He has contributed 3 articles on non-cooperation to the columns of the Servant of Calcutta and other papers. I had the pleasure of reading them during my Bengal tour. Mr. Stokes approves of non-cooperation, but dreads the consequences that may follow complete success, that is, evacuation of India by the British. He conjures up his mind a picture of India invaded by the Afghans from the northwest, plundered by the Gurkhas from the hills. For me, I say with Cardinal Newman, I do not ask to see the distant scene, one step enough for me. The movement is essentially religious. The business of every God-fearing man is to dissociate himself from evil in total disregard of consequences. He must have faith in a good deed, producing only a good result. That, in my opinion, is the Gita doctrine of work without attachment. God does not permit him to peep into the future. He follows truth, although the following of it may endanger his very life. He knows that it is better to die in the way of God than to live in the way of Satan. Therefore, whoever is satisfied that his government represents the activity of Satan has no choice left to him but to dissociate himself from it. And we cannot do better than following out fearlessly and with confidence the open and honorable program of nonviolence and sacrifice that we have mapped for ourselves. And we cannot do better than following out fearlessly and with confidence the open and honorable program of nonviolence and sacrifice that we have mapped for ourselves. In an article, Tyranny of Words, published in Young India on 14 October 1926, Gandhi wrote about reason and faith or prayer. Quote, experience has humbled me enough to let me realize the specific limitations of reason. Just as matter misplaced becomes dirt, reason misused becomes lunacy. If we would but render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, all would be well. Rationalists are admirable beings. Rationalism is a hideous monster when it claims for itself omnipotence. Attribution of omnipotence to reason is as bad a piece of idolatry as is worship of stock and stone, believing it to be God. Who has reasoned out the use of prayer? Its use is felt after practice. Such is the world's testimony. Cardinal Newman never surrendered his reason, but he yielded a better place to prayer when he humbly sang, "One step enough for me." Shankara was a prince among reasoners. There is hardly anything in the world's literature to surpass Shankara's rationalism, but he yielded the first place to prayer and faith. Everything on this earth lends itself to abuse. It seems to be a law governing everything pertaining to man. No doubt religion has to answer for some of the most terrible crimes in history, but that is the fault not of religion, but of the ungovernable brute in man. He has not yet shed the effects of his brute ancestry. I do not know a single rationalist who has never done anything in simple faith and has based every one of his acts on reason. But we all know millions of human beings living their more or less orderly lives because of their childlike faith in the maker of us all. That very faith is a prayer. That very faith is a prayer. Gandhiji made a statement on art and religion in conversation with the editor of The Island, Joseph Bard. It was in 1931. Indian art symbolizes this relationship and at the same time expresses the ritual of religious worship. If an artist who thinks he is surrounded by people without any religious sentiment chooses to become a scoffer, he will inevitably frustrate his own vocation. On the other hand, if he feels that his is a mission, then a poet or artist has a right to oppose the prevalent creed or lack of creed, and he will be justified by the greater value of his own revelation. I do not pretend to know anything about art, but I believe firmly that both religion and art have to serve the identical aims of moral and spiritual elevation. The central experience of life will forever remain the relationship which man has to God, and it will never be superseded or replaced by anything else, just as human bodies will never free themselves from the law of gravitation. In this relationship of man to God, it is the mysterious forces which matter. In this relationship of man to God, it is the mysterious forces which matter, not the meager texts expressed in words. There may be changes in this relationship of man to God as represented by the various and successive religions of mankind. But to quote Cardinal Newman, one step enough for me. In his letter to Narasimha Rao B. Divatia on October 18, 1932, Gandhi wrote about the meaning and significance of this hymn for himself, his friends all over the globe, and his ashram inmates. Quote, "Instead of praying silently, we will sing your translation, Premal Jyoti, of Lead Kindly Light. Does it not give as much peace as both of you would desire? Your children, of course, enjoy eternal peace. But are not all the children in this world your children? You have taught plenty of such wisdom to others. May it help you in your present plight." You will like this story about Premal Jyoti. When Father Elwin was leaving, he thought that it would be a good thing if my Christian friends could mentally be in communion with me once every week. For that purpose, he asked me to suggest a hymn which all of them might sing at a fixed hour one day every weekend. I selected Newman's hymn. It is now sung by friends in America, Europe, India, and other countries on every Friday at 7:30 p.m. We here, the inmates of the ashram at Sabarmati and some other people, sing Premal Jyoti at the evening prayer on Fridays. Thus, the life which you have poured into this bhajan is increasing in its power. May this gift of yours bear fruit for you too. Yours sincerely, Mohandas. In one of his letters from Noakhali, dated 5th February 1947 to Edmond Théophile Privat from Geneva, Switzerland, a promoter of the world language Esperanto, 1947, Gandhi wrote about his walking pilgrimage at Noakhali and associated this with the hymn. Quote, "That the real nonviolent conduct of a person may well be followed in practice by the multitude is perfectly true. Such was my case and is today. But the prime mover has to be au fait with the science of non-violence. My walking pilgrimage is going on steadily, and it certainly gives me immense peace of mind. The upshot I do not know, nor do I care to know. Man has no control over results. that is the sole prerogative of God. Hence I can sing with Cardinal Newman, one step enough for me. I do not choose to see the distant scene. Lead thou me on. You know the hymn, don't you? The initial verse of the hymn is, lead kindly light amid the encircling gloom. Unquote. Quakers take this idea of the inward light, walking in the light of Christ, to refer to God's presence within a person. The term inward light was first used by early Friends, Quakers, to refer to Christ's light shining on them. The term inner light has also been used since the 20th century to describe this Quaker doctrine, inward light or inner light. A Quaker, Rufus Jones, in 1904 wrote that the inner light is the doctrine that there is something divine, something of God in the human soul, resembling that of God in everyone, which was first used by one of the co-founders of the Society of Friends, George Fox. Gandhi wrote, having made a ceaseless effort to attain self-purification, I have developed some little capacity to hear correctly and clearly the still small voice within. It was in 1932. And in 1920, there are moments in your life when you must act even though you cannot carry your best friends with you. The still small voice within you must always be the final arbiter when there is a conflict of duty. The inward light and the voice of conscience, audible and visible after self-purification through fasting, prayer, and silence. The inward light and the voice of conscience. This is the global guide Gandhi reminded us of. Let us recollect this ethical and spiritual heritage Gandhi recollected for us so we can rediscover this step by step. One step enough for me. Keep thou my feet. Lead thou me on. And now I ask my friend to play this song for you.
Yes, sir.
So thank you for your attention.
Namaskara. I'm very happy to be here today amidst all of you and for the international webinar on Gandhiji as the global leader, organized by the Sheshadripuram Evening Degree College in association with the Karnataka Gandhi Smaraka Nidhi and the Gandhi Information Center, Berlin, Germany. So I feel very, very honored to be amidst the esteemed speakers and the faculty members, and especially all the young students, the youth who have joined today. I thank you very much for being here. Gandhiji, of course, had great expectations and faith about youth who can really take the lead to change the situation. This webinar assumes even more significance amidst these challenging times of violence and human rights violation in the recent violent conflicts going on in the world right now. It has affected the humanity and especially compromised the old, infirm, children, migrants, and women's rights. The world can draw lessons from the powerful leadership of nonviolence and universal peace of Mahatma Gandhi, whose legacy and teachings continue to have a huge global influence even after 7 decades. Nowadays, our world has become so interdependent that any conflict between nations inevitably impacts the rest of the world. The only way for establishing peace in the world is through nonviolence. We need to develop a sense of solidarity amongst us by considering ourselves as part of the human family, as brothers and sisters. This is the way to establish a more peaceful world, and that's what Gandhiji's leadership stood for. He also stood for the right to freedom, right to dignity and equality, and the right to freedom from bondage, poverty, untouchability, and discrimination. All these are the essence of human rights. He had said, and I quote, "When I despair, I remember that all through history, the ways of truth and love have always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they can seem invincible, but in the end, they always fall. Think of it always," unquote. During the commemoration of the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi, I had an opportunity to give talks in 135 countries, both by visiting personally as well as virtually when we were in the thick of Corona pandemic. Now, as a part of the 75th anniversary of India's independence, I'm conducting a certificate course on Gandhian philosophy, which is being hosted by the Indian Mission in 109 countries. The respect and reverence shown by the people of these countries for Gandhiji truly shows his global influence and people's eagerness to understand his leadership in these challenging times. I would like to share some of my experiences briefly, as I had the opportunity to interact in these countries with leaders, academics, and activists who have been inspired by Gandhiji and have taken the initiative to inspire others. I have also observed that people are eager to understand about the leadership, especially about the global leadership of Gandhiji, and put them into action to change the society. So in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, people wanted to learn about the leadership of Gandhiji, especially his crusade for restoring the dignity and self-respect of humanity. In the last few decades, the Arab world has witnessed the ugly and horrible images of violence and extremism. In the midst of these harsh and desperate conditions, the Saudi people wanted to learn from Gandhiji's intellectual heritage, as his legacy resonates with the message of tolerance, coexistence, and human peace. In Qatar, Bahrain, and Kuwait, people wanted to learn more about how Gandhiji succeeded in using peaceful and non-violent resistance or satyagraha to realize his dream of a peaceful world. They told me that they have been inspired to work on peaceful conflict resolution through Gandhiji's way of interfaith dialogue. The interest in the people of Lebanon was to understand how Gandhiji promoted the values of freedom, justice, tolerance, and fought non-violently against the ideology of violence, extremism, and tyranny. I also want to tell you about Mayor of Abel El Saki village in South Lebanon, who was a teacher in a school earlier. He's greatly influenced by Gandhiji and taught about non-violence to the children. Mayor Sami al-Bekri, same person of South Lebanon, has made his village a model symbol of peace and non-violence to inspire the succeeding generations in South Lebanon. He has also helped in establishing the Mahatma Gandhi Park, which epitomizes key principles of Gandhiji, such as truth, peace, purity of means, non-violence, and self-discipline. I happened to interact with Dr. Ogarit Yunan and Dr. Walid Sleabi from Lebanon, who are the co-founders of the Academic University for Nonviolence and Human Rights in Beirut. And I have been deeply influenced by Gandhiji's nonviolence and are very actively promoting nonviolent living. They are the recipients of the Jamnalal Bajaj Award for exceptional work in their leadership of Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy in inspiring younger generation. When I gave a talk in Sweden to the students, I was pleasantly surprised that they had been reading about Gandhiji regularly. Hence, they were most interested to understand Gandhiji's methods for establishing peace and harmony. After the class, a group of young students came to me to say that they found Gandhi to be a cool guy because he did what he said. In Norway, the students had put up an exhibition of their paintings of Gandhiji. After the interaction, they wanted to know more about the man who single-handedly opposed injustice and promoted tolerance. And I told them that Gandhiji respected individuals as individuals without attaching any labels and walked the talk. Many of them said that when they grow up, they want to be like Mahatma Gandhi. In Palestine, Mahatma Gandhi remains as a real source of inspiration for the young generations. His nonviolent approach and principles of satyagraha continues to inspire millions for equality, liberty, freedom, and dignity. And Gandhiji's legacy is seen as the eternal message that will continue to inspire humanity. He is revered as a symbol of justice to the extent that some Palestinians have named their children as Gandhi. Palestinians believe that in spite of all the odds they face and lack of justice for their cause due to many factors, including regional and international, they remain hopeful and truly identify with Gandhiji's quest for justice, peace, and harmony. During my visit to Fiji, I had an opportunity to give talks in many places and met the third and fourth generation of the indentured labor from India. They have preserved the Indian culture so very sacredly. They have great reverence for Gandhiji and for his influence in making their lives better. Though Gandhiji had not visited Fiji himself, but he took up the cause of the indentured labor in Fiji by sending Barrister Manilal and Deenbandhu C.F. Andrews to work amidst them for establishing dignity and justice. In Tunisia, I was invited to unveil the statue of Gandhiji in the campus of Manoba University, where the students said that their family members were a part of the Jasmine Revolution in 2011, which inspired a wave of similar protests throughout the Middle East and North Africa, known as the Arab Spring. These youth were keen to be part of such a peaceful revolution and wanted to learn more about being fearless like Mahatma Gandhi, who inspires them to fight against all types of injustice and tyranny. Likewise, in Egypt, I interacted with the students in 6 universities. They had great admiration for Gandhiji and recalled that Ahmad Shauqi, the Egyptian poet and dramatist, had met Gandhiji when he had stopped over in Port Said on his way to the Second Roundtable Conference in 1931. Egyptians view that Gandhiji's non-violence was not just a philosophy or political strategy, but as a means to achieve justice, change, and social reform. I have visited Japan many times, and I have also gone and given lectures in 15 universities. And at each place, I found the students and faculty eager to incorporate the leadership traits of Gandhiji in their lives. Gandhiji's Gandhiji appreciated the Japanese people's courtesy, punctuality, discipline, and hard work. Many Japanese scholars and Buddhist monks were influenced by Gandhiji and had come to India to visit him. The Japanese students said that today, most of all, what they needed is a complete changeover of their ways of thinking and deed. If mankind is truly eager to survive, there is no other way but to accept Gandhiji's message of peace and follow his method of conserving the environment for living in harmony with nature. Gandhiji has directed us to the way from hatred to love, from punishment to forgiveness, from greed to renunciation, and above all, from violence to non-violence. One of the Japanese scholars told me that Gandhi-san admired Japanese self-respect, unity, and patriotism. He was a man of honesty, a man of purity like the Buddha, and we must judge a man like Gandhi-san not by knowledge and mind, but by heart and love. This is the understanding of Japanese people about Gandhiji. In Afghanistan, people wanted to walk on the path shown by Gandhiji for bringing about harmony and brotherhood. Local people have painted the walls with murals of Gandhiji and his messages of peace. Even after they were destroyed, people have again and again repainted them. During my interaction with people in Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, Sudan, Mozambique, Ghana, and Kenya, people express that they want to live in peace and tolerance. And the best way to achieve this has been shown to the world by Gandhiji through his thoughts, words, and deeds. In these turbulent times, the words of Gandhiji give us hope, they said. Thus, with some of these personal observations, we can see that Gandhiji's leadership and the power of peace, non-violence, and living in harmony with nature is capable of shaking the souls of human beings to bring about a transformation in their lives by cutting through the boundaries of international borders, space, and time. He is the leader of India with global visibility, and the world judges us by his standards. Gandhiji's entire life story is about action to bring about positive changes. He both succeeded and failed in what he sought to do, but he always moved forward. And he never gave up the quest for improvement, both social and spiritual, and both for individuals and for the nation as a whole. Today, Gandhiji is remembered not only as a political leader, but as a moralist who appealed to the universal conscience of mankind. He changed the world, and the impact is seen by the world leaders who were inspired by him, from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to Madiba Nelson Mandela, to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Father Kunz, George Bernard Shaw, Cesar Chavez, Oscar Arias Sanchez, Tawakul Karman, and there is a galaxy of men, women, and children in different parts of the world who have taken a leap from Gandhiji to fashion their initiatives for ensuring harmony, justice, and for fighting discrimination. Gandhiji is widely recognized as one of the 20th century's greatest political and spiritual leaders. Few men have ever had as much of an impact on our world as Gandhiji. He was charismatic, thoughtful, and analytical. He was also very much a product of his times, yet one of his greatest source of inspiration was the Bhagavad Gita, the sacred Indian scripture. at a very young age as a student in London, when he read Bhagavad Gita for the first time, the verses from the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita appealed to him immensely, and he lived his life according to the central messages of the Bhagavad Gita, selflessly, without attachment and possession. Whether the world today needs to learn from the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi is the question. In today's globalized world, we already have all the material comforts required for living contently. We are taught by the market forces to want more and more, even as we see the world around us engulfed in greed, violence, and intolerance. Today's world bemoans violence in the frequent terrorist attacks, riots, war, and imminent possibility of a nuclear war. But last century was even more disastrous. In such a time, a frail leader, Mahatma Gandhi, was the most influential and important political leader and thinker of the 20th century, whose legacy, whose leadership still inspires people globally. What is it that makes him such a global leader? How is it that a man born in one country 150 years ago, maybe 52 years ago, still spoken of with interest, appreciation, and curiosity in so many different parts of the world? What explains the extraordinary appeal of Gandhiji in the minds of young and old? What is it that he is being remembered in this world today? So, in my view, he is remembered as a freedom fighter, a social reformer, whose lifelong crusade was against the evil of untouchability and giving equal status to women, and as a profound visionary. He was a prolific writer and edited newspapers for more than 4 decades. He was a strong believer in equality of religions and had many friends from other religions. He had made an in-depth study of all the different religions of the world. That obviously makes him someone who relentlessly pursued truth all through his life. In his ashrams, in the morning and evening prayers, there used to be all religious prayers, including Lead Kindly Light. I was born in Gandhiji's Sevagram ashram in Wardha, in Maharashtra. And since my childhood, I have grown up reciting the Sarvadharma Prarthana, the all religious prayers, which I do even till today. Apart from these, his leadership left its mark globally because of his legacy of nonviolence. Gandhiji experimented with nonviolent collective disobedience to unjust laws and authoritarian governments, to which he gave the name Satyagraha, that was adopted later by the activists in the totalitarian regimes of communist Eastern Europe. Solidarity, the major Polish movement, was inspired by Gandhiji, and as are countless popular struggles across the globe that have been an invaluable component of the globalization of the civil rights movement. In a world that is divided in the matters of faith and religion, that is shaping and determining the politics of this world in a barbaric way, Gandhiji brought in a novel path. He continued to lay importance on interfaith dialogue and cultivating understanding towards nonviolent, compassionate, and emancipatory aspects of their own religion. He inspires globally as the first environmentalist and a minimalist. He recognized the need for conservation and preservation way before the danger of climate change had preoccupied the world. Gandhiji had pointed out that Earth provides enough for man's needs, but not for every man's greed. He was the original thinker who clearly understood the reality of misuse, overuse, and abuse of the global commons. He lived out his environmental philosophy in his own life. He was a man who compulsorily recycled everything and lived in harmony with nature. He lived his life with openness and transparency. Gandhiji's ashrams were accessible to anyone. Anyone could walk in and debate and argue with him. Gandhiji was an extraordinary leader who lived his life in the open. And that makes him so very different than the leaders of today. But one more thing that is different was his sense of humor that distinguished Gandhiji from leaders in his time and ours, which is why his life, his message, his leadership, and his personality resonates with all the citizens of the globe today. Dr. Albert Einstein's message on Gandhiji's 75th birthday sums up the essential character of his leadership. He said, and I quote, "A leader of his people, unsupported by an outward authority, a victorious fighter who always scorned the use of force, a man of wisdom and humility who has confronted the brutality of Europe with the dignity of the simple human being and at all times risen superior." Unquote. Gandhiji's greatest leadership trait was his dream and his ability to visualize freedom for the enslaved India, with a lifelong focus on to make India into a self-reliant nation economically and socially. The element of Gandhiji's leadership was his lifelong commitment to achieve that intertwined vision of Purna Swaraj, or complete independence. Starting in 1893 with his work in South Africa till the end, Gandhiji worked, mobilized, wrote, and spoke about the goals of freedom, inclusion, harmony, diversity, and empowerment. He aligned most of the social movements he led around these goals. Gandhiji was a very efficient leader who not only transformed himself, but also transformed the world and his followers. That is the trait of the transformational leader who leads them to a better condition from where they find themselves to be in. A very strong sense of self-respect marked Gandhiji's character from a very early age. Gandhiji taught that it was not a miracle to be able to transform oneself at all. Each one of Gandhiji's actions were well thought out and necessary. A well thought out response geared towards changing a people and nation always leads towards a better future to survive, evolve, grow, and to prosper. According to Arnold Joseph Toynbee, the British historian, philosopher, who said, and I quote, "The generation into which I happen to have been born has not only been Hitler's generation in the West and Stalin's in Russia, it has also been Gandhi's in India, and it can already be forecast with some confidence that Gandhi's effect on human history is going to be greater and more lasting than Stalin's or Hitler's." Unquote. With these words, I conclude my talk on the global leadership of Mahatma Gandhi and thank the organizers for inviting me for the webinar. I thoroughly enjoyed giving this talk to all the youngsters who are participating today in great numbers, and I wish you all the luck in your endeavor. Namaskara.
Let me at the outset congratulate Sheshadripuram Evening Degree College, Gandhi Study Center, for having organized such an important international webinar on Gandhi as a global leader. I'm happy that Karnataka Gandhi Smarak Nidhi, Bangalore, and the Gandhi Information Center, Berlin, have collaborated in organizing this international event. This is the 83rd international webinar, and we have with us granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhi, Ila Gandhi, giving keynote address. And Madam, we are really fortunate to have you with us for the second time on this international webinar. And in your keynote address, you first referred to the Gandhi's outstanding leadership by P.A. Nazareth, and how Gandhi built up his leadership qualities or evolved through his own experience and experimentation. And Gandhi, as you rightly said, was a human being, and everyone can try to follow him. And when the years he spent in South Africa, of course, shaped his leadership. And you told how the treatment meted out to him in Durban court had a deep impact on him, and how he devised this, what is called the concept of resistance to fight injustice meted out to the blacks in South Africa. And also this concept of resistance gave him a world view. So he adopted this non-violent resistance or satyagraha as a means to stand up against injustice. And this in fact attracted world attention. And you also told us how the principles of satyagraha, which he drew from the Unto This Last by Ruskin, and the three wonderful principles of Sarvodaya, which Gandhi, not only imbibed but also practiced. That is, the good of the individual is contained in the good of all. Everyone has the right to earn from one's own livelihood, and a life of labor is a life worth living. All the three principles are so important, and the integration of these principles can only give a complete picture of Sarvodaya. He practiced what he believed strongly, and the ashram that he established in South Africa, was to keeping this concept of what is called unto this last. That is, the good of the individual is contained in the good of all, and how he chose to take to simple living, and more than anything, the interfaith idea of common prayer of one common God by the people of different faiths is something that is an idea that he picked up in South Africa, and something that is really very revealing for us. And Gandhi developed what is called the holistic view of life, particularly on aspects like health and environment. And you very beautifully said that non-violence is the way. And he was convinced, and that is how the idea of reuse, recycling was practiced by him, and how the solid waste management was so meticulously managed in his ashram in South Africa, and things like that. And another thought that you shared with us was how Gandhi realized that media was so important to educate the community, and how he actually used it for the good of all his movements and agitations. And another thing that you told us was transparency in accounting, which Gandhi demonstrated. And all these things, I think, helped when Gandhi returned to India, and when he took up started spearheading the national freedom movement here. And the Satyagraha became a strong tool by the time he left South Africa. And Mahatma Gandhi's Hind Swaraj continued to inspire him till his last breath. And you told us how his ideas of Hind Swaraj are even today relevant. And particularly his ideas about participatory democracy, that is, bottom-up governance, which he called Gram Swaraj, were so important. And in these days of rat race of accumulation of wealth, again you cited the principle of Sarvodaya. The good of the individual is contained in the good of all, and it is this rat race of accumulation of wealth that is not just a local problem; it is a global problem. And Gandhi becomes very relevant here, and we must realize the fragility of our own life and our planet. That's what Gandhi realized, and 100 years ago he gave us these lessons for us to follow. And Gandhi's lessons are very crucial for our times, and his leadership qualities are global and relevant. Thank you, Madam, for sharing these wonderful ideas with us through your keynote address. Then we had Mr. Christian Bartolf, who spoke on Cardinal Newman's Lead Kindly Light amid the encircling gloom. It was very touching. And the video that he played of the choir was really very touching. And how this Lead Kindly Light made Gandhi as a global guide. That is something that he dealt with in his talk. And how he told us how Lead Kindly Light became Gandhi's most favorite hymn, and it inspired him so deeply. And he also told us how the Bhagavad Gita, where he imbibed the concept of work without attachment. There's one great idea that Gandhi picked up from Gita, and the importance of prayer, moral and spiritual elevation, self-purification, and the like. We can rediscover, he said, all these values step by step. Thank you, Mr. Christian Borta, for your wonderful presentation. And of course, we have Madam Dr. Shobhana Radhakrishna speaking on Mahatma Gandhi's leadership that inspired the world. She started her talk by saying that human rights violation has been everywhere, and then Gandhi can offer lessons to the world, and non-violence is the only way. The picture of the larger human family cannot be lost, and that we have to adopt the Gandhian principle of no discrimination, no expectation. to build a better world order. And she was telling us that people are eager to learn from Gandhi the lessons like tolerance, coexistence, and human faith. And she shared her experiences with very many countries, young people in over 135 countries during the Gandhi 150 celebrations. And Madam, we must really congratulate you for the kind of good work that you have done in taking Gandhi's life and message across the globe. And you also spoke of interfaith dialogue. You said Gandhi fought violence with non-violence. And that is what marks Gandhi as an international leader or a global leader. Gandhi did what he said, and his legacy will continue to inspire. And you also quoted the example of Palestinians who have named even their children as Gandhi. That's really inspiring and truly touching. And today, unfortunately, in India, we have not been able to take Gandhi so seriously. And in fact, Gandhi, during his own lifetime, learned so many good lessons from Japan, as you were telling. Today, the world needs Gandhi. And the two great ideas that he gave of building a non-violent society and of building a communitarian society is all the more important and relevant as of now. And the greatest Gandhian value is to stand up against injustice, to learn to live in harmony with nature. And Madam, you told us that he was a great moralist who appealed to universal conscience of mankind. And I remember one British philosopher by name Job describing Gandhi as a moral genius. That is something, a great tribute to Gandhi. And you also told that Bhagavad Gita was a source of inspiration. He learned lessons like selflessness without attachment from the Bhagavad Gita. And you also finally concluded what makes him as a global leader. Gandhi was a freedom fighter, a social reformer, and he fought against untouchability, which was a curse on the Indian society. And then he fought for equal status for women. He fought for the first person who spoke of what is called Sarva Dharma Samanatva, that is equality of religions. It is not the numbers that are going to determine whether a religion is big or small or great or not great. It was this concept of equality of religions that was very much important. And he pursued truth all his life. And you also told that Vinoba's Sarva Dharma Prarthana was sung in all the prayers meetings of Mahatma Gandhi. And Gandhi was able to unite people of all religious faiths through the core message of Sabko Sanmati De Bhagavan. That was Gandhi. And I think we had a very useful discussion in the last 1.5 hours. And I must congratulate the college for having put together such great minds. And we were able to have such fruitful deliberation. I congratulate and thank all the participants for sparing their time and being a part of this great international webinar. Thank you very much.